you're looking at these live images of Beirut and the skyline over Beirut. It's now 10 past 10 in the UK and 10 past midnight, just 10 minutes gone past midnight here in Lebanon. And we are hearing the sound of ammunition. You can see the red streaks in the sky, the tracer streaks that you're seeing at the moment, where this is a sign of, as Adam was saying, relief and perhaps celebration as well on some level, that the 6 weeks of misery that has been felt across this country might be coming to an end. This ceasefire that was announced by President Donald Trump, he said that it would come into effect at 10 Eastern Standard, and so that was 10 minutes ago. And even though we saw strikes from both sides, both the Israeli strikes and Hezbollah strikes on northern Israel in the last 10 minutes or so, it is hoped that that ceasefire has come into effect on both sides. We will, of course, continue to follow all of the developments, but for now, back to you in the studio.
Yalda, thank you. Well, let's bring in our guests for tonight's edition of The Wrap, Christina Patterson and Rod Liddle. Your thoughts, first of all. We're hearing the sounds of ammunition in Lebanon, but those are the sounds of celebrations.
Yes, they like shooting guns in the air wherever they are. I think it's. You hope that the ceasefire will last, but it's very difficult to see how it can, because Lebanon can't control Hezbollah, and America can't control Israel. Lebanon has fought to control Hezbollah for years and years. Israel has also admitted that it cannot defeat Hezbollah in a war. So it is an interminable conflict, and it's very difficult to see how this will work. Let's hope it does.
But can Iran control Hezbollah, because they want an end to the war? So presumably they'll be saying to Hezbollah that you have to abide by this ceasefire.
Well, I think if anyone can control Hezbollah, it's Iran. But I think the thing is, all the parties have gone rogue in this, including America. So Israel has gone rogue, Hezbollah has always been rogue, and Iran has always been rogue, although it seems to be acting a great deal more rationally through this whole manufactured conflict than America does. I think the key issue, in a way, will be Netanyahu, and I think that he has clearly really made Trump angry, because on the day when the ceasefire, the day after the ceasefire was announced, there were 100 bombs dropped in 10 minutes on Beirut. There were no warnings issued, as far as we know, and 300 people were killed that day in just a few minutes. Yeah. And that was one of the most shocking massacres, actually, that has happened in our lifetime. I mean, it's not even... I mean, what happened in Gaza was horrific, but one could see, at least at the beginning, that there was some kind of rationale, which was that Hamas were hiding in tunnels and using, the argument was, civilians as human shields. But this was just a massacre. And I mean, it's very hard to get anything straight out of Trump at the moment, because, unfortunately, he's completely lost his marbles, it seems. But there was footage of one interview he did when he was climbing on a plane, and he used the F word about Netanyahu, or at least about Israel, and said, that they hadn't listened. And I think even Trump has had trouble reining Netanyahu in. But I think because Trump is at some level so furious with the fallout of this war, which he thought would last. He believed Netanyahu's presentation. He thought it would last a couple of days. He thought the Ayatollah would be killed, there would be great rejoicing in the streets, and it would all be, kumbaya. And clearly that's not what happened. And I think he feels betrayed by Netanyahu for, as he would see it, misleading him. Of course, the director of the CIA told him that the intelligence assessment of Netanyahu was farcical. So I think Netanyahu is very, very unreliable, but I think America will be trying to keep Israel under a firm leash now.
Just very quickly, Rod, in terms of Hezbollah and this ceasefire, they've not been involved in any way or means, have they?
No, this is the problem. There are still people, incidentally, who think that Donald Trump is playing a brilliant five-dimensional game of chess. I keep reading this, and but it becomes less and less believable with every day that goes by. And don't forget, 2,100 people killed in Lebanon already and 7,000 injured, many of them kids. And it is a war which they cannot win, and which they've admitted they cannot win. So I think what they're doing, they'll consolidate by remaining in occupation of parts of southern Lebanon, 10, 15 miles south of the Golan Heights, and hope that eradicates most of the rockets which fly into places like Haifa.
But Netanyahu's saying today that they are going to remain in Lebanon.
Yeah, that's right.
They're not going to exit, as is
well, there is a point to that. There is a point to that, just as there was a point to taking the Golan Heights. They took the Golan Heights illegally, admittedly, but you could see why they did it, and it did provide a degree of security for Israel, which they will never give up. The question then becomes, they're now in southern Lebanon, will they ever give that up? Because they have a tendency not to.
Well, Rod and Christina, we'll come back to the war in a moment, but first I want to focus on the growing calls today for Sir Keir Starmer to resign. Well, that comes after he faced accusations of misleading Parliament over the vetting process for the appointment of Lord Mandelson as US ambassador. Here's how party leaders responded.
If he has misled Parliament, as it looks like he has, he should resign. If he has broken the ministerial code, as it looks like he has, he should resign. If he withheld documents from, via cover-up from Parliament, he should resign.
He was relying on the vetting process as his defence. It looks like the vetting process was ignored. This is hugely serious, and I think he will probably have to go.
It must be the case that the Prime Minister had been told he failed vetting. He lied to the British people, he lied to Parliament, he must resign.
Well, our chief political correspondent, John Craig, has joined us in the studio. John, is the Prime Minister in serious jeopardy tonight?
Oh, my goodness, yes. I mean, those MPs who thought he was over the worst, he was going to survive dreadful election results on the 7th of May, will be in despair tonight as the scandal of Mandelson returns to haunt the Prime Minister, and he faces fresh questions, not just questions about lying to Parliament, misleading Parliament, a bungled decision to appoint Mandelson, but the very fact that nearly all the opposition parties are calling for him to resign. Now, what prompted this was a story that appeared on the Guardian website this afternoon. Headline, Mandelson failed vetting but Foreign Office overruled decision. And they said that he failed his security vetting clearance, but the decision was overturned by the Foreign Office. Now, the charge of misleading Parliament, Kemi Badenoch was saying, he said on 3 occasions, back in 10th of September last year, full due process was followed during this appointment. Full due process was gone through. Full due process was gone through. He said that again. In fact, he said it again. The Tories have previously accused him of also misleading Parliament on the 4th of February when he said, we went through a process, there was a due diligence review. And critics are also pointing this evening to a news conference he gave the day after that, 5th of February, in Hastings, when he was out on the road, where he said, security vetting carried out independently by the security services, which is an intensive exercise that gave him clearance. You have to go through that before you take up the post. Well, according to his critics, he has misled Parliament. Knives are out tonight for Ollie Robbins. He is the Mandarin's Mandarin, who is the permanent secretary at the Foreign Office, because it's being claimed that he was the one, by the Prime Minister's allies, it was Ollie Robbins, nothing to do with number 10, it was Ollie Robbins who swept it all under the carpet. Now, let me tell you how number 10 have responded. They have basically pinned the blame on Mr Robbins and the Foreign Office, claims that he's been thrown under a bus by number 10. This quote from the government says this: neither the Prime Minister nor any government minister was aware that Peter Mandelson was granted developed vetting against the advice of UK security vetting until earlier this week, Tuesday, we're being told. Once the Prime Minister was informed, he immediately instructed officials to establish the facts about why the developed vetting was granted in order to enact plans to update the House of Commons. Now, we understand he's going to do that on Monday. My word, he'll face a torrid time, because the Mandelson scandal has blown wide open again. And it's probably, I mean, it's been compared with the Profumo scandal, all sorts of previous scandals, worse than Partygate. It is dreadful for the Prime Minister, and there are plenty of people who just do not believe the official version of accounts, that it's scarcely believable that the Prime Minister wasn't told, and that Ollie Robbins didn't tell either the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy at the time, or the PM. And so he's in trouble. The calls for his resignation, the SNP are saying that he should face an ethics inquiry by Sir Laurie Magnus, the city grandee, who is the independent advisor on sleaze, as we like to call it. Oh, by the way, Plaid Cymru have called for Parliament to be recalled tomorrow, rather than wait till Monday. It's usually the Liberal Democrats, isn't it, that do that?
Yeah. Well, Ed Davey has said he thinks he probably will have to go over this, Christina, and we've had Kemi Badenoch saying, why didn't he come out during the humble address, and can't afford to have a Prime Minister that the country doesn't trust.
Oh, what a mess. Poor Keir Starmer, what a mess he makes of things, is the truth of it. But I don't believe I don't believe he lied. I don't believe he deliberately misled Parliament. I do believe that he thought, I think he was given reason to think that Mandelson had passed this vetting procedure. I very much doubt that anyone explained the difference between developed vetting and whatever the other, normal security vetting. It's a total mess. I mean, the Mandelson thing absolutely is a scandal. I personally think it's worse than Profumo, because I think, Mandelson was betrayed his, assuming that those emails were true, he betrayed his country.
That's right, selling government secrets. Well, not selling, but passing on secrets.
It doesn't
various bits of government economic policy.
It doesn't get more serious than that. So it was a terrible error of judgment for Mandelson to appoint him. But it would seem to me to be ironic if he actually had to go over what's really a technicality. I mean, I find it breathtaking that Foreign Office officials didn't tell Number 10, but I don't believe that, maybe Number 10 was told. I don't personally believe, I think Keir Starmer has messed up all kinds of things. I don't personally believe he's lying over this, but it may be that
there was a filter between the actual findings of the security briefing and Sir Keir Starmer, that there's somebody in between who's saying, we're going to ignore this and go ahead and appoint him anyway.
I'm sorry, but it's inconceivable that wouldn't have got its way back to either the Foreign Office or to Sir Keir Starmer. It is just stretching credulity far too far. And there is, even if you were telling the truth, there's a perfectly good reason why he could resign anyway, which is that, if he misleads the House inadvertently, as he's putting it, it's what Amber Rudd did.
Yeah. I think that's perfectly feasible.
Do you believe that he's telling the truth, though?
Well, no, actually, I don't, because I just cannot believe if it's true. Then I think the Foreign Office needs disbanding. Because if it's true that this didn't get back to the person who was making the decision, then it's an absurdity, and it tells you legions about how the civil service and the Foreign Office work. It's an appalling offence in itself. But don't forget, Starmer was told that Mandelson was an appalling appointment by Jonathan Powell at the time he made he decided to ignore all that.
Yes, we learned in the documents that came out a few weeks ago, that great tranche of documents, Powell, the National Security Advisor, former Chief of Staff to Tony Blair, experienced diplomat, said it was rushed and rather weird, was the word he used.
Interesting, though, that it's supposed to be the Foreign Office that overruled the decision, because David Lammy was the Foreign Office Minister at the time, and he's been...
I wonder, because...
He's been quoted on record as saying that he was against the appointment.
It doesn't add up. And then there's Lammy's friendship with J.D. Vance, and of course the reason that the deeply flawed and we now think treacherous Mandelson was put into that post was because the thought was that he was very experienced in trade. There was all this tariffs nightmare going on, and you know, it was thought that he would be a Trump whisperer, in the ghastly phrase, and he was rather a good Trump whisperer. He also happens to be a traitor if those emails.
Well, it was more than that, wasn't it? I mean, the very reasons why normal people, such as you and I, might object to the appointment of Mandelson were the reasons why he was appointed, which was that he was a friend of Epstein and knew all these people and had an inside track on all these people. It wasn't in spite of, it was because of.
Yes, that's true.
And the government knew he was a risk because I've mentioned it so many times now, but Peter Kyle, the business secretary now, in this very studio, told Trevor Phillips when he said, why was he appointed? Oh, he was worth the risk. So they knew he was a risk and they went ahead anyway.
They thought it was a risk worth taking.
Risk worth taking, yes.
Well, let's focus now on the global impact of the Iran war. The Chancellor has told Sky News she's working intensely with the Energy Secretary and the oil and gas industry to ramp up our oil and gas production. Rachel Reeves is in Washington with other G7 ministers and spoke to our economics and data editor, Ed Conway.
Myself and the Energy Secretary, Ed Miliband, are working intensely with industry on the technical details of the tiebacks that we announced at the budget last year, which enables oil and gas companies to exploit their facilities' existing infrastructure to get more oil and gas out of the ground. And that is the quickest way that we in the UK can ramp up our oil and gas production.
Knowing as I do how focused you are on this, you know, does it feel really like the right time at the moment, with the world short of oil, for the UK to be basically banning new licences on North Sea oil drilling?
Well, we made a commitment in our manifesto just under 2 years ago that we would honour existing licences for oil and gas.
But I'm talking about for new commitment.
The companies are having to reapply for licences at Jackdaw and at Rosebank. Those applications are live at the moment. The Energy Secretary will make a decision in the next couple of months on those.
Let's bring in Ed Conway now. Ed joins us. He is... There you are, Ed. Are we going to see the Chancellor U-turn on Labour's manifesto promise not to issue new oil and gas licences?
I mean, it's a really good question. But the funny thing is, there is so much about this that depends on what happens elsewhere. I mean, you know, listen to what you've been discussing throughout the programme about what's happening with the fate of Keir Starmer. If Keir Starmer goes down, then so too potentially does Rachel Reeves, so that is a big question mark. And then on top of that, there is the enormous question mark that I think everyone is discussing out here in Washington. So this is the International Monetary Fund's spring meetings, basically finance ministers coming from around the world talking about the state of the global economy. And clearly there's one issue that's above all else on the agenda, which is what's happening in the Gulf and the economic implications for everyone else. And those implications are really profound. In Europe in particular, there's potentially only 6 weeks left of jet fuel because a lot of that jet fuel previously came from the Gulf. It can't come out anymore. In Asia, the situation is even more severe. But then, as I say, there's this kind of unreality in that if you look at the stock market here in America, it's climbing up towards new highs because a lot of people are looking at the news happening in Lebanon, they're looking at the news happening in Iran and wondering to themselves, oh, might this end soon? And then we have this relief rally. So all of that is overshadowing this big question mark about what does that mean for the UK and what does it mean for the North Sea? And Rachel Reeves, and you can probably just about tell from that interview, I mean, she's having to be kind of careful about what she says, but she deeply believes that the UK should be trying to make energy cheaper, trying to get more energy out there. And there's a little bit of a battle going on in the cabinet right now between Ed Miliband, who has been, you know, nervous about approving new oil, not just approving new oil licenses, but you've got these places which already kind of have licenses but have yet to have drilling started, like Jackdaw, like Rosebank, where he could make a decision quite soon about whether they are allowed to go ahead, but we have yet to see what that decision is going to be. So all of this stuff is kind of bubbling around, but above all else, there's that big kind of question mark. You know, is the UK going to push forward to more North Sea drilling? Some people in the cabinet, including Rachel Reeves, seem to be keen on that. Miliband seems to be heading in a different direction. And then, you know, there's that deeper kind of existential question about, you know, who is the Prime Minister going to be? Who is the Chancellor going to be? What's the cabinet going to look like? Because the UK has some deep economic challenges right now, partly as a result of what's happening around the world.
Indeed, Ed, thank you so much for that assessment. A really intriguing interview with Rachel Reeves there. And he mentioned Jackdaw and the other oil fields, Rosebank. The decisions on those are due in about 8 weeks' time, but it's not the decision of the Chancellor to make. That's up to Ed Miliband.
Yes, so sack him. It's the obvious thing to do, isn't it? I mean, this has been going on too long, and it's not just about oil. We have got to realise that this country needs to be far, far more self-sufficient than it has been. We have basked in this kind of been assuaged by affluence and peace for, 38 years. And it's come to an end, and we have to realise it's come to an end. And so, yes, obviously open those oil fields. The effect upon global warming is negligible. But also, you saw the bioethanol story, where they're now reopening a plant on Teesside, which was closed by this government a year ago in order to assuage Donald Trump's tariffs. We can't do that anymore, and don't keep that bioethanol plant open temporarily, keep it open permanently. We need that kind of infrastructure. And we need to stand on our own 2 feet, both as a government, but also as a nation, of individuals as well. We need to be more resilient about what's going on. We need to sort of stockpile food occasionally, as the Swedes do, as the Finns do, as the Norwegians do.
You're going to have a rush on the supermarkets.
Well, you will, yeah, and it'll be toilet rolls, won't it? It's always toilet rolls. But we do need to look at the world in a very different way. Globalisation hasn't done it for us.
I think we are starting to, aren't we? The government starting to.
Well, Rachel Reeves is starting to, because she sees a huge black hole as well in her economy, which oil would help. But when are these when are the modular nuclear plants to be built around the coast? When is that going to start? They were meant to start in 2005. We have kidded ourselves for too long.
More immediately, the head of the International Energy Agency saying that Europe has only got about 6 weeks of fuel left, which is literally going to affect people going on their summer holidays.
Summer holidays, yeah. I mean, one of the infuriating things about, if you're following what's happening in the US, is that it seems that most people don't have a clue what is happening in the rest of the world and how it's affecting. The IMF have said that we're likely to be hit more seriously than any other G7 economy. And the Institute of Energy are saying that it's going to be like, a combination of the 2 energy shocks of the 1970s and Ukraine. I mean, this is enormous. Also, the United Nations have said that at the moment, 32.5 million people are likely to be pushed into poverty as a result of the war so far. And of course, America has been less hit than we have been, because it's more, it doesn't get so much of its oil from the Gulf, and because it's more self-reliant in terms of energy. So, I mean, it's pretty scary stuff.
Yeah, no, people have been feeling the effects of the war, and ever more so now when we look to the summer, and some people hoping to get away. Think twice, or check that at least you can get a refund, and it's not a ticket price that...
Come to the northeast of England.
Oh, yes, I think you said this.
The weather...
Have a staycation.
You must get some, you must have some gig with the, Visit England or something.
I just live there. I like having visitors.
He'll tell us about it in the break. We are going to have to take a break now. Coming up next, we'll take a first look at what's making the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers. Do stay with us if you can.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be allowed to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
You are watching The Wrap. Time now to see what's making the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers. Well, The Guardian leads on Keir Starmer's troubles over Peter Mandelson and fresh calls for the PM to resign. That's also the lead in the FT, where it says Starmer has been accused of misleading Parliament after it emerged that Lord Mandelson was made ambassador to the US despite having failed to clear security vetting. Starmer in peril is the headline in The Eye, which also carries the accusations that the Prime Minister allegedly misled Parliament over the vetting of Mandelson. The Telegraph carries the same story, saying the Conservatives have insisted that Sir Keir Starmer misled the House and the public. The Times front page also leads on calls from opposition parties for Starmer to resign. Starmer on brink as his Mandelson lies are exposed is the front of the Mail. And the Express also leads with that story on its front page. Its headline, Starmer must resign. The Mirror says Russian President Vladimir Putin has drawn up a hit list of 4 UK locations he could target for helping Ukraine in their war effort. The Sun carries photos of Sarah Ferguson at a ski resort in Austria and calls for her to break her silence on her relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. The Star leads with a tribute to former Arsenal goalkeeper Alex Manninger, who was killed in a car crash at the age of 48. And the Metro reports comments from Victoria Beckham addressing the ongoing feud with her son, Brooklyn. Let's start with the FT, and I think it is the only paper reflecting the ceasefire in Lebanon. The fact that it's actually happened. I think I'm right in saying that it is the only one, Rod. Truce agreed, Trump says.
Incredible. Yeah. A lot happening. A lot happening.
Or possibly more to do with the timing, because it only came in at 10 p.m, didn't it?
Possibly. And it's held so far.
We believe?
Yeah, 40 minutes nearly, and so things are looking up. But, I mean, most of the papers are... And I think the story for the weekend is going to be Starmer and Mandelson, isn't it? I mean, that's what's going to occupy everyone's attention.
Yeah.
And I just talking about that and what you were saying earlier, I'm just trying to work through the procedure of it, that if you have decided that Peter Mandelson is unfit to be an ambassador, how would you not tell anybody about that? How would you just keep that? I just can't believe that. Yeah. How would you keep it yourself?
Well, the process is more nuanced than you fail or you pass the security vetting. There are various levels.
He failed one.
But he did get through on some elements.
Yes, sure. But it was thought that his relationships with Russia, which are pretty well documented, Oleg Deripaska and so on, and indeed China, were the things at which he came into trouble. So you would have thought that someone would have mentioned that somewhere along the line. My guess is that they probably did, and that it was brushed aside as, oh, it's a risk, as Peter Kyle said, but we're going to push ahead with it.
I'm sure they thought it was a risk. I don't doubt that for one moment. I mean, we don't know, do we? But given what we know about Keir Starmer's very passive approach to being Prime Minister in all kinds of ways and his lack of curiosity, and there was that, that book recently written, I can't remember what it was called, but it was about, essentially about his passivity. It wouldn't surprise me if he was basically told, well, it's complicated, we all know it's a risk, but, he's got through, sort of thing. And if Starmer didn't ask, I mean, you wouldn't necessarily know that there were these multiple layers. So I don't personally, obviously I might be wrong, but I think Keir Starmer is inept in all kinds of ways. I think to lie so blatantly, that doesn't ring true to me of the man.
This is a chap who is able to renege on a policy one day after his announcement.
Yeah, no, he reneges on policies all the time. I'm not saying.
Well, there's a question of honesty in that, isn't there?
Is there?
Yes.
Isn't that changing your mind when the facts change?
No, because the facts don't change. The facts are exactly the same. When adverse criticism
I don't think it's the same as. I don't think it's the
difficult.
same as lying. To change your views on policy is not the same as lying. I think. Anyway, I think that personally, and we can't, neither of us can know this, I think that the degree of dysfunction for this thing to happen and not to be reported at Downing Street is breathtaking.
Yes,
that is true.
Yes,
and it does show that there has been a dysfunctional operation, and my understanding is it's a little less dysfunctional now, but who knows? But yes, I mean, it has been a huge scandal, the whole Peter Mandelson thing, absolutely rightly so. I don't personally think this is such a big scandal as the scandal of Mandelson allegedly betraying his country. To me, that's as bad as it gets, actually.
But he was appointed. I mean, that's where
nobody
the problem
appointed him to betray his country. I mean, I think.
But would you have appointed him? I mean, come on,
I think
did anyone in the country sit up and think, well, I think that's a damn good appointment?
I wouldn't have appointed him, but I absolutely do see that when you've got someone like Trump in the White House, and you've got literally the livelihood of 67 million people because of trade deals and so on in question, I can see that you might feel
you're saying that desperate times, desperate measures.
Yeah.
The Eye is saying that number 10 is blaming the Foreign Office, that it stopped there, so the information never actually got to...
Well, if that's true, as I said earlier, the Foreign Office needs an overhaul very, very rapidly indeed. But I still think it just... I mean, the same as Kemi Badenoch has said, the same as Farage has said, the same as Davey has said. And, of course, they have political skin in the game, but it just stretches my credulity far too far. And if that is the case, if you're right, I mean, that's a calumny on the Prime Minister anyway, that he didn't know, that he took no interest in it.
Yeah, I think he does. I think he does have a very worrying lack of curiosity. I also think he's got a very big job, and he is one man trying to do a very big job. And I think with what's happening in geopolitics, I mean, obviously this wasn't happening at the same time, but there's always some enormous
all Boris did was eat a cake. It wasn't even a very nice cake.
It wasn't all that Boris Johnson did. We also those parties in the garden, etc., etc., etc.
Come on, I mean,
a voice in my ear said he had his cake and ate it.
He had his cake and ate it. But in the scale of seriousness, I think this way outweighs what Johnson did. And this isn't coming from someone who supports Boris Johnson.
Well, obviously we can and are arguing about that, but I think what was so serious about what Johnson did was that people could not be by the side of dying relatives while there were parties going on in Downing Street. That was the issue with Boris Johnson, and that's what people won't forgive him for. It wasn't because he ate cake in the boardroom at Downing Street.
Getting back to Keir Starmer, though, the Telegraph asking the question, did he mislead Parliament? And that is the question that's being
Well, he did mislead Parliament, but the argument is whether he did so advertently or not. I mean, we know he misled Parliament because he told them a number of times all the right checks were done and everything was chickadee-boo. So we know he's misled Parliament. The only question is whether he did so consciously or not. And
should he resign either way? The Express asking that question.
I don't think he should resign either way. I think if he didn't deliberately mislead Parliament, and as you know, I personally don't believe he did, I don't see why he should resign over that. I also think there's a very strong argument during a war which affects this country dramatically and is going to have an enormous effect on our economy for the Prime Minister not to resign unless it is absolutely unavoidable.
If not now, when? If
there are these things called elections.
We have been here before with Sir Keir. There was a period, a year, a little under 6 months ago, when he seemed to be on the verge of resigning every week.
So if he resigns on Monday, Rod, knowing the available candidates and knowing the gravity of the situation we're in at the moment, because economically this is really catastrophic, do you really think that's the best thing for the country if he resigns on Monday?
Possibly not. Possibly not.
Well, then don't you think he shouldn't resign?
No, because it's a question of honesty. If it is discovered, if it is found out beyond all reasonable doubt that he knew about...
Yes, I agree. In that case, I think he should resign, but I don't personally think that is the case, and I thought you were saying that he should resign anyway.
Well, I think there's a precedent for him to resign over inadvertently misleading the House, as Amber Rudd did exactly the same thing.
There is a precedent, but it's such a serious time. Look at the options. Look at the options. You know, Wes Streeting isn't going to get in because the Parliamentary Party won't let him. Angela Rayner's still not cleared up on the tax front. You know, then you're going to get some loony left nutcase running the country when we're in a war.
Let's just
but anyway,
bring you some breaking news now that we're hearing. Sky News understands that the then Foreign Secretary David Lammy did not know the Foreign Office had overruled Lord Peter Mandelson's vetting until Thursday afternoon. The Deputy Prime Minister was Foreign Secretary, as you know, when Lord Mandelson was appointed British Ambassador to the US. So that the very latest from the Deputy Prime Minister, that when he was the Foreign Secretary, he did not know that the Foreign Office had overruled Peter Mandelson's vetting until Thursday afternoon.
Well, today. Until today.
Wow.
Remarkable.
Wow.
Remarkable.
I mean, so essentially, if Starmer didn't know and Lammy didn't know, and assuming they're both telling the truth, that means that some civil servant made this absolutely enormous decision and didn't tell anyone.
That's what I don't quite buy.
Or directed by someone within number 10.
Yes.
Morgan McSweeney.
Yes. Well,
you might think that, I couldn't possibly
arguably.
He seems to take all the flack, doesn't he? Poor old Morgan. I don't know. I think he will survive this because he tends to survive. You know, that is something we've seen. He doesn't like having to sack people when he's called to sack people, and he has no intention of resigning himself. But whether he should or not, I think probably he should.
Okay. Even if he hasn't misled, even if it wasn't deliberate.
Yes, because it just beggars belief that a government could run that way.
But putting aside,
leaving aside the fact that the Labour Party has no candidate who anyone with any ounce of sense
That's a pretty big issue. That's a pretty big issue when we're just in the middle of a war.
No, but it's not the point.
Well, I think it is the point. I think it is the point.
I think you're going to agree to disagree. You think he should resign, and you think he shouldn't.
Unless he has lied. If he has lied.
Now we're going to have a break. Coming up, the Pope against the President. The war of words between the Pontiff and Donald Trump breaks out again.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
We'd been warned that we would meet people in the lowest moment of their lives.
Their story is one of fundamental American failure. Well, a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club, but I have to say there are more media here than there are supporters.
We love Trump!
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too. This is just the audience that Joe Biden wanted.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
You know, it's easy to go to politics.
But it's important. It's at the heart of the issue.
For all the talk of a toned-down, humbled Trump, yes, maybe there was just a little less rhetoric, a little less divisiveness, but in the end it was the same rhythm, the same speech, the same man.
All them people that died in Russia and Ukraine, they'd still be alive today if Donald Trump was the president.
If it was my wish, have a businessman that's strong like Trump, but maybe just doesn't say as much, you know?
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What we've been allowed to see over here is a humanitarian corridor. Free wherever you get your news.
A young American medical student is making remarkable things happen.
I've seen a lot of difficult things, and honestly, it breaks my heart. These children don't deserve that.
I don't think there's a single Arab I know who isn't seriously disturbed by what's going on.
And so they gathered for this wonder of nature.
I'm very excited right now.
This is an extraordinary moment beyond anything I could have expected. Sky News, get the full story first.
I bet right now you often find yourself asking why. Why was a certain decision taken? Why did something happen? Why did they say or do that? I'm Neil Patterson, and it's my job as a journalist to find out why. Just explain why.
It's a difficult one.
Well, I mean, it's massive.
It's a very, very severe situation.
So if you want to make sense of this complicated world, Sky News' new podcast, This Is Why, is your daily fix. One story every day, and we can find out why together. Listen and follow wherever you get your podcasts.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more.
Well, let's kick off.
And make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? It's coming out! What more do you need?
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed. Mr. Zuma, Sky News. People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood has rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
You are watching The Wrap. Well, they had a war of words earlier this week. Today, in an extraordinary intervention, Pope Leo claimed the world is being ravaged by a handful of tyrants. Have a listen to what Pope Leo said and how Donald Trump responded.
The masters of war pretend not to know that it takes only a moment to destroy. They turn a blind eye to the fact that billions of dollars are spent on killing, on devastation, yet the resources needed for healing, education, and restoration are nowhere to be found. The world is being ravaged by a handful of tyrants.
The Pope has to understand Iran, very simple. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. The world would be in great danger.
Well, the Pope's not the Pope, Trump has repeatedly attacked the Pope. He's accused him of supporting Iran and their nuclear ambitions.
Yeah, well, look, there's a couple of things. I mean, firstly, Trump is playing to a domestic audience a little bit. He knows that the Catholic vote in America is largely East Coast, well-educated and not his constituency at all. And he knows that there's quite a strong Protestant ethic running through all of his states, particularly in the south, but also to a degree in the north. But then there is one other thing, one other area I would defend him. I think it's quite good to have a go at popes every so often. I mean, no one... I can remember when Private Eye was set up, they decided immediately to have a go at Pastor Schweitzer, because he was the most loved man and respected man in the world, and they thought, we'll have a go at him first. I don't think anyone should be beyond that sort of scrutiny, and there is something banal about this pacifism. Would he have said this in 1939? Or indeed when America joined the war, as Trump often forgets, 2 years later in 1941. You know, would he have urged pacifism upon us then? There he was, channeling Bob Dylan with his Masters of War stuff. It doesn't really add up to a hill of beans. I disagree with the war against Iran because I don't think there were clear objectives, and I don't think that what he wanted to do will be achieved. But I think the sort of blanket, oh, we must never go to war stuff, it's a bit banal, isn't it?
We're going to cut in, Rod, because we've got some breaking news to bring you, and that is that Ollie Robbins has lost his job. The Prime Minister and Foreign Secretary have lost confidence in Foreign Office Permanent Under Secretary Sir Ollie Robbins, and he will be leaving his post, it is understood. So that's Sky News understands this. I'm not sure it's anywhere else at the moment, but this is our exclusive and the breaking news. And we mentioned his name.
Big story, we did.
Well, I think the mystery is kind of solved. Clearly, the view from Downing Street is, well, I mean, up to...
How?
Well, it looks as if no one else was briefed. It looks as if this was Ollie Robbins' decision.
Have you not followed Sir Keir Starmer over the last 2 years? He will sack an underling. That is what always happens. Always an underling. Now, I don't know... do we have any details about the non-disclosure agreement at all, which Mr Robbins may have...
Very detailed NDA.
It will be very detailed, won't it? Let's wait to see what Ollie Robbins has to say further on down the line. I suppose Starmer will think that this draws a line under it. I don't think it does at all.
OK. Thank you both. Much more at the top of the hour. Christina and Rod, thank you.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter.
I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story? I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They will be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
Tonight on The Wrap, the growing clamour for the Prime Minister to resign after he was accused of misleading Parliament. And tonight, the first casualty. The Foreign Office Permanent Undersecretary, Sir Ollie Robbins, loses his job over the vetting of Peter Mandelson. Tracer bullets and fireworks are fired into the sky above Beirut in celebration as a 10-day ceasefire comes into effect between Lebanon and Israel. Now, the question, will it hold?
They're all agreeing it's a very nice little package for about a week, and we're not going to have lots of bombs dropping, and we're going to see if we can make peace between Lebanon and Israel.
And the Chancellor tells Sky News she's working to ramp up the UK's oil and gas production after the global impact of the Iran war. We discuss the day's biggest stories with the journalist and author Christina Patterson and the Times radio presenter Rod Liddle. Plus, a first look at the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers, including The Guardian, which leads on the story that Lord Mandelson failed his security vetting, but it was overruled by the Foreign Office. Good evening, Rod and Christina. Welcome to you both, and to you, John. We start this evening for perhaps the most serious crisis the Prime Minister has faced during his premiership. There are growing calls today for Sir Keir Starmer to resign. That's after he faced accusations of misleading Parliament over the vetting process for the appointment of Lord Mandelson as US Ambassador. Tonight, the first casualty. The Foreign Office Permanent Undersecretary, Sir Ollie Robbins, loses his job over the affair. Rob, your thoughts?
I think there are two things here. Firstly, that this is the first casualty, as you said in the introduction. I think there will be more. Secondly, I don't know why he's resigned. I don't know the details of why he's resigned. Is it assumed that he was the person who decided not to tell anybody? In which case, how on earth did he get a knighthood? The third thing is something structural and really quite important, which is, you'll remember the last Conservative government, both under Sunak and Johnson and before, all had problems with the civil service. A continual rancorous and vituperation coming from the civil service unions and so on. It's clearly a problem there. Now, when Labour came into office, it was all going to be fine. It hasn't been. It has been, again, right from the start, with Sue Gray and so on, and the batting back and forth, there is still a structural problem with the civil service.
Christina?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're both right that he is likely to be the first casualty. It's not as if this is going to kind of, wipe the wound clean. But and I think the civil service. I think there is always a kind of rather frictionous. That's not the word. Relationship between government and the civil service. I do find it breathtaking that David Lammy as Foreign Secretary and Keir Starmer as Prime Minister, the two key people in this appointment, apparently didn't know it. I don't mean by that I think they're lying. I just think how unbelievable to have a system set up to have this whole thing happen without the two most significant people involved being informed. It does look as if that is what's happened. What's very hard to understand is if it was Ollie Robbins unilaterally making this decision to do this and not inform people, what on earth was he thinking? Had he been told by someone, just make it happen? And if so, by who? Because David Lammy claims he didn't even want Peter Mandelson as ambassador to Washington. And Keir Starmer seems to have had a rather arm's length attitude to the whole thing. So it's absolutely baffling.
But someone would have spoken to Ollie Robbins, won't they? Otherwise he would never have made a decision.
I think it must be Morgan McSweeney who said make it happen, but who knows?
We're all playing detective now, aren't we? John, what are the real answers?
He's the fall guy, he's a scapegoat. This afternoon, there was lots of comments from members of Parliament and others that he'd been thrown under the bus by the government, taking the rap for this fiasco. What we have learned in the last few minutes is that we understand that the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary, that's Yvette Cooper, have lost confidence in Ollie Robbins. Ollie Robbins will be leaving his post, we are told. He's been sacked. This is brutal.
Yeah, he didn't resign,
and it's the very fact that we're being briefed that the PM and the Foreign Secretary have lost confidence in him. Well, toast. I think looking at this, and given we were just talking about David Lammy, I think this is Yvette Cooper saying he's got to go. She is the one who's also said she was the one who sacked Peter Mandelson because she was the Foreign Secretary. But over the course of the last few hours, he has been dragged further and further into this scandal. It must be said, largely by the government, by Number 10. But also, in some of the reporting and some of the evidence we've heard, we spoke to Emily Thornberry this evening here on Sky News, and she was quoting the evidence that he gave to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. That was back in November. And a very cross Emily Thornberry was saying that his evidence was so unsatisfactory they were going to call him back. At one point, he was asked, this is at the hearing in November, he was asked, was Mandelson's appointment escalated? I certainly cannot comment on that, was the answer. He talked about... the vast majority of vetting reports were relatively straightforward, ones that require more senior judgment and potentially a discussion about managing and mitigating risks are escalated appropriately. That's why that question. Let me read to you what the government have said and what has really led to this sacking of Mr Robbins. Incidentally, he got his knighthood a few years back under the Tories. You remember, right, yeah. Ollie Robbins, we've known about Ollie Robbins for quite a few years because he was Theresa May's Brexit negotiator. He was loathed by the Eurosceptics and the Brexiteers, and he's really sort of bounced back, really, to get the top diplomatic job in Whitehall. Anyway, let me just talk about what the government said tonight. Neither the Prime Minister nor any government minister was aware that Peter Mandelson was granted this thing called developed vetting against the advice of UK security vetting until earlier this week, Tuesday, we're told. Once the Prime Minister was informed, he immediately instructed officials to establish the facts about why the developed vetting was granted in order to enact plans to update the House of Commons. He's going to do that on Monday. The Plaid Cymru want the House to sit tomorrow, but that's not going to happen. So clearly, he is the scapegoat here. He has been blamed, rightly or wrongly, for this fiasco and scandal, really, because as things have turned out, it was a disastrous decision and something went horribly wrong during the process. The reason that the Prime Minister is facing calls to resign is because, as Kemi Badenoch has said, he misled the House of Commons, as we would say, lied to the House of Commons. And the word lies appears on quite a few front pages tonight. On the 10th of September 2025, the Prime Minister 3 times talked about full due process was followed. Then, fast forward to February 26, he said that there was a due diligence exercise. We went through a process. And then a lot of the Prime Minister's critics have been quoting something that the Prime Minister said at a news conference the next day when he was out electioneering in Hastings. He said let me get the quote for you. At a news conference in Hastings, 5th of February, he said he was asked about security vetting. He said it was security vetting carried out independently by the security services, which is an intensive exercise that gave Mandelson clearance for the role. You have to go through that before you take up the post. Critics are saying that wasn't true either. So the charge is he lied to MPs, he also lied to the public. That's why he is in peril tonight. And I'm not sure sacking Ollie Robbins will make things any better for the PM.
Can I ask... It would have been preferable, wouldn't it, for the government if Ollie Robbins had resigned and copped the blame for that?
Well, I dare say we at some point will see an exchange of letters.
We don't know whether he's resigned or not.
You've only got to look at what they've lost confidence in him.
But he could have resigned.
Well, he may well have offered his resignation, but he's been put in an impossible position.
There was a report somewhere earlier where he said, Ollie Robbins was quoted as saying, I'm not going to let something along the lines of, I'm not going to carry the can for this, which obviously he is doing. Yeah. But my best bet, assuming I'm right that Keir Starmer didn't knowingly mislead the House, my best bet that that Morgan McSweeney put very heavy pressure on him. That's my best bet. I may be wrong, but that's my guess.
Conveniently, he's no longer in the government.
Yeah. On that line of not knowingly misleading.
Just very quickly, going back to Emily Thornberry, I mean, she was talking about calling him back to her committee. I mean, she may well try and do that, but quite often ex-civil servants say, "Oh, I've left the government now. I'm not going to do that. Sorry."
Like Pam Bondi and
Yeah. No, I was just going to say on that line of whether he knowingly misled Parliament. In an interview with Beth Rigby on the 16th of March, after those that you quoted, she asked the Prime Minister if he misled MPs, and his answer was an emphatic no.
Indeed.
He wasn't going to admit it, was he?
I think,
but of course,
I think the ground shakes under your thesis, if I may say so. But
well, we'll find it. We may or may not find it.
MPs often offer the defence that they inadvertently or not knowingly misled the House. I mean, to be fair, that sometimes happens. He will. I mean, he has up to now on the whole Mandelson thing, where he's admitted there was a day when he appeared in the Commons in a quite contrite manner and said, "Look, it's my mistake. I take full responsibility." But his argument has always been that Mandelson lied to him. But in actual fact, we learned during the documents that came out recently, Starmer never actually interviewed Mandelson about his security vetting and so on. I think I'm right in saying it was Jonathan Powell, and then it was cleared by Matthew Doyle, who was the head of communications at the time, head of news or whatever his title was.
But Powell was against it.
Powell has said...
Lammy was against it.
They're all claiming they were against it. And I think Angela Rayner has said she was against it as well.
She didn't know it was happening, did she?
Well, may not have done.
But Sir Keir Starmer saying that, that Mandelson had lied to him, but also now that seemingly the Foreign Office did as well.
By omission. By not being told. But as I say, the government's opponents are saying, well, I'm not sure we believe that.
Yeah, no, nor me.
Well, we've had all the opponents coming. Badenoch, why didn't it come out during the humble address? Can't afford to have a PM that doesn't trust, that the country doesn't trust. Ed Davey thinks he probably will have to go. Richard Tice, he deliberately misled Parliament on the 4th of February. And Stephen Flynn, as you say, demanding that the government's ethics advisor investigates whether Starmer misled the public. The story is going to run and run, as they say. Now, we talk a lot about men associated with Jeffrey Epstein, but we don't often hear from the survivors. Lisa Phillips was abused by the billionaire paedophile. She was in Westminster today, making a direct appeal to the Prime Minister and the King for a full public inquiry into a child trafficking network. We're here in the UK. She's been speaking to Ali Fortescue.
Our team met with some MPs today, and we had a really good meeting. It was productive, and they were helping to give advice and guidance of what our next steps should be here in the UK to push a public inquiry. And that was initially my stance today, was to call to the King and the Prime Minister, about if they're going to support a public inquiry.
Do you think the Prime Minister's listening to you?
Well, I learned today in the meeting that he has the power to have a public inquiry like that, if he wanted to do so. But I also learned that it's a long process, and the advice that the MPs gave me, that gave us, was to reach out to survivors of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, to talk to the victims that are out there.
Lisa Phillips here in Westminster today, and interviewed in this very studio. What do you think the likelihood is that she'll get what she's asking for, public inquiry, in this country?
I think probably in 5 or 10 years' time. That's usually what we do when there is a big establishment conspiracy or an establishment mess. We tend to have inquiries, proper inquiries, 5 or 10 years down the line, and sometimes don't even find out the truth for 30 years down the line, as we saw with the Bloody Sunday inquiry, with the Hillsborough inquiry. If an inquiry took place now, it would probably be a whitewash, because that's the way we do things. So I hope she gets what she wants. My suspicion is that there are a lot of Brits involved somewhere along the line with the Epstein business.
She's making a direct appeal to the Prime Minister and the King, in the interview, saying that, she'd happily meet with the Prime Minister. Do you think he will answer that call?
He's got quite a lot on his plate at the moment, hasn't he? I think he's more likely to answer that call than the King because of the very delicate situation of the King not meeting victims at the moment and during the state visit. And that's been a kind of a decision that was made that has upset a lot of people in the US, although the Queen has spoken out very, very forcefully and done a lot of campaigning for the victims of sexual violence over the years. I don't know if they'll get an inquiry, but what I would say is that people have paid so far. I mean, two people, Mandelson and the former Prince Andrew, are two people whose reputations, lives have been completely destroyed by Epstein, as it seems that they deserve to be. But no one has paid any price in the US whatsoever. So personally, I would rather see some actual, action over there. I mean, it looked as if Pam Bondi did her absolute best to cover the whole thing up, with huge swathes of the files being redacted. They still haven't all been released. I don't think the issue is that we haven't heard enough of the victims' stories. Anyone who cared to listen could hear the victims' stories, and they are deeply harrowing. What we haven't heard enough of is gaining any kind of justice for them in actually summoning people to the men to get them to testify and talk about what they did or didn't do, but certainly what they saw. And personally, I think Andrew should be going over to the US. He should be testifying. I think.
Well, he's been invited to, but the likelihood of
absolutely,
that
absolutely. And Fergie should be going, but Trump should also be talking, because there are very, very serious allegations about Donald Trump, allegations that he raped a 13-year-old, and there's been plenty ever since the Epstein story broke. There've been plenty of stories on, not just on the Democrat side, but MAGA as well, about a cover-up, essentially. And I think this does need to come out.
We must just say that Donald Trump has denied those allegations, and any appearance from any individual within the Epstein files doesn't automatically...
somewhat questionable allegation. I mean, of all of them.
Well, we don't know until it's been investigated, do we? But good old Melania Trump certainly helped things along last week with her surprise announcement about not being friends with Epstein.
That took everyone by surprise. It was completely
including Donald Trump, it seemed.
But just to reiterate, he has denied all allegations made against him. Let's talk about the Middle East now. Should we go back to that story? And a 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon has been in effect for just over an hour after both leaders agreed to a truce. It's a significant development. More than 2,100 people have been killed and 7,000 injured by Israeli airstrikes in this country since the start of the war. Yet, importantly, Hezbollah, the group backed by Iran, was not part of the agreement. And Israel's Prime Minister has confirmed his forces won't withdraw from southern Lebanon. Let's have a listen to what the US President and the Israeli Prime Minister had to say.
It's very exciting because it's 48 years. We're going to be meeting with Bibi Netanyahu, as you know, and the president of Lebanon. And I had a great talk with both of them today. They're going to be having a ceasefire, and that'll include Hezbollah. And I think it could be number 10 for me. They're all agreeing it's a very nice little package for about a week, and we're not going to have lots of bombs dropping, and we're going to see if we can make peace between Lebanon and Israel.
We remain in Lebanon in a thickened security zone. It is not the 5 points that were before the Iran war. It is a security strip that begins at the sea and continues to Mount Dov and the outskirts of Mount Hermon up to the Syrian border. There we are staying. We are not leaving. This allows us, first of all, to break the danger of infiltration into our communities, and secondly, it allows us to prevent direct anti-tank fire into the communities. The communities are now protected from these two dangers.
Well, our lead world presenter, Yalda Hakim, sent us this analysis from Beirut.
A 10-day ceasefire announced by the US President Donald Trump has come into effect. Although it will be fragile and difficult to maintain, there will be moments where the ceasefire will be broken. But there are hopes that this time things will be different. This was a difficult and very sensitive ceasefire to negotiate. But the US President, after speaking with the President of Lebanon and the Prime Minister of Israel, made this this announcement. He also said that he hopes that the two men will be able to come together face to face in the White House. This is a significant moment. While it isn't a roadmap to some kind of peace, the fact that after 6 weeks of war, of hostilities, there will be now some kind of cessation of those hostilities is a big moment for Lebanon. Over the course of the last 6 weeks, we've seen more than 2,000 people killed, over 1 million people displaced. And of course, we saw that brutal attack that took place across this country last Wednesday, where there were 100 strikes in just 10 minutes, which killed 357 people. There are still big questions that need to be asked. And I put that to Lebanon's displacement minister. I asked him what actually would happen next. Just have a listen to what he had to say.
Lebanon has made it clear we will not accept any long-term stay. Any solution has to include total Israeli withdrawal from all Lebanese territory. Not 1 inch from Lebanon is going to be given up. We will insist on that, and I think the U.S. and Israel have said they have no territorial ambitions. Israel has said that. The U.S. has passed on the same message repeatedly, that Israel does not have any territorial ambitions in Lebanon.
So the big issues for the Lebanese government, on the one hand, they say that they cannot accept the IDF staying on Lebanese territory. And on the other hand, they know the importance of disarming and decommissioning Hezbollah's arms. So this will be a major task for this country. And you can just see in the images behind me, the tracer ammunition, the sound of gunfire here, as this country and this nation comes to terms with the fact that perhaps for just a small moment, there might be an end to this war.
So no doubt a significant moment, but also significant the fact that Israel are not going to be withdrawing troops. And also, Hezbollah has not been involved in any part of these negotiations to get to this ceasefire point. So will they even uphold the ceasefire?
Well, I think it doesn't sound like a very promising start. And let's not forget that there wasn't a war in... obviously, Hezbollah has had its long-term aims, aided and abetted and financed by Iran. But there wasn't actually a war going on 6 weeks ago between Hezbollah and Israel. So this was... Netanyahu wanting, well, who knows exactly what he wanted to do, wanting his forever war, essentially, to keep himself out of jail. But just even in the extract we heard just now, it's very hard to reconcile any of that, because I think Netanyahu has made it clear that he wants to occupy the area up to the Litani River, which is southern Lebanon. 1 million people have been displaced. It's all very well for Donald Trump to say, we have a very nice package here. No, we don't have a very nice package, because thousands of people have been killed, including children, men, women, children, journalists, poets, paramedics, people actually targeted, civilians targeted, and we have 1 million people currently homeless. And they have made clear, they have stated that their policy was Gazification of southern Lebanon, which is essentially making it a wasteland. So given that that is currently Netanyahu's stated policy, it's very hard to see how that can be any kind of basis for a peace agreement, let alone a ceasefire that holds.
And Rod, even after the announcement of the ceasefire, I think an hour afterwards, people were killed.
Yeah, well, indeed. We've got to remember a couple of things. I take what you say, but we've got to remember a couple of things about Hezbollah. This is a grotesque organisation of terrorists who have bullied Lebanon, never mind Israel.
Yeah, no, I know.
And you say, there was no war 6 weeks ago. Well, every day rockets come over from Hezbollah into the cities of Israel, Haifa particularly, but also near the Golan Heights. Every day rockets come over. And you ask yourself, should Israel have to put up with that all the time?
Well, look, all kinds of things that shouldn't happen in the Middle East that are absolutely catastrophic. What people
what I mean is you can see why Israel would wish to
absolutely. I see why they... Well, no, I don't. I see why they would want to stop the rockets coming. I don't see why they would think that eliminating thousands, killing thousands of innocent Lebanese people and civilians and destroying their homes.
Well, that's what happens in war, remember?
I understand that's what happens in war, but it's not going to solve the problem of Hezbollah or the tunnels, just as it didn't actually solve the problem of Gaza. Hamas are still in charge of Gaza, and we have an entirely traumatised population with 72,000 people killed. And if Netanyahu has a clear policy for how to deal with this, great. But his policy for dealing with Iran has been shown to have one or two flaws in it.
Very quickly, Rod, before we go to break.
Well, my suspicion is that Israel will not pull out of southern Lebanon for a long time until they are confident that their cities on the borders with Lebanon and just inside Israel will be free from attack. That's all they want. That's what they want.
Yeah, that's what Netanyahu is saying. That buffer safety zone.
If they weren't constantly, didn't have their policies of illegal settlements and of the violence, the ongoing violence in the West Bank.
You're justifying Hezbollah now, are you?
No, I don't justify Hezbollah at all. I absolutely don't justify Hezbollah. But what I'm saying is that if you want to have the moral high ground, it helps if you stick to international law, which they don't.
We must take a break. We have run out of time, sadly. Before the break, drill, baby drill. When we come back, Rachel Reeves says she wants to ramp up the UK's oil and gas production. Stay with us for more on that.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more.
Well, let's kick off.
And make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News. People are directly protesting.
The whole neighbourhood has rallied around her. It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter.
I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to to open up and tell your story.
Let's focus now on the global impact of the Iran war. The Chancellor has told Sky News she's working intensely with the Energy Secretary and the oil and gas industry to ramp up our oil and gas production. Rachel Reeves is in Washington with other G7 ministers and spoke to our economics and data editor, Ed Conway.
Does it feel really like the right time at the moment, with the world short of oil, for the UK to be basically banning new licences on North Sea oil drilling?
Well, we made a commitment in our manifesto just under 2 years ago that we would honour existing licences for oil and gas.
But I'm talking about for new commitment.
The companies are having to reapply for licences at Jackdaw and at Rosebank. Those applications are live at the moment. The Energy Secretary will make a decision in the next couple of months on those.
The head of the IEA, the International Energy Agency, says that Europe only has 6 weeks potentially left of kerosene, so jet fuel left. How much do we have left in the UK?
Well, there are no problems with supply at the moment, and
but I mean,
airlines
how much of a stockpile do we have?
About that. There are limits to how much you can keep in one country, but we are confident about our supply. But, of course, as a government, you would rightly expect for us to be preparing for a whole range of scenarios. But it also goes back to this point.
So you are preparing for a whole range of scenarios?
Well, I think people would rightly expect, as with COVID,
what kind of
as with an
are we
energy price
here,
shock. But look, we are less exposed than we were a few years ago because our reliance on gas and oil is less than it was a few years ago.
Well, we're on air now. What were you saying? No, don't. We don't know how much jet fuel we've got left from that interview. I think we can take away.
She doesn't know, you don't know, I don't know, nobody knows. No, it's... but there is the kind of, as spring progresses, the kind of scene of a gradual awakening in this country that we do have to do something. I don't want a country which is reliant upon fossil fuels any more than Ed Miliband does. But there are pressing imperatives at the moment. You know, we have to feed ourselves. We have to be able to produce carbon dioxide and so on, so that food can be transported, so that food can be processed. We need to do all these things. And previously, we've relied upon the mutual dependency of globalization, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work at times when there's wars going on. It doesn't work when your number one ally ceases to be your number one ally. We need to stand on our own 2 feet, and we need to probably drill briefly for the next few years, and we need to do everything else which the government has promised we're going to do to support our energy industry, to lower the prices of energy for companies, to have more homegrown energy, and that means probably oil fields in the North Sea.
So you're in the drill, baby drill, Trump camp?
Yeah, I wouldn't quite put it like that, you understand. But yes, I'm afraid I am, yeah.
We might not know how much jet fuel we've got left in the UK, but the head of the International Energy Agency says Europe has around 6 weeks left.
Well, kiss goodbye to your summer holiday or your spring break, everyone. I mean, I think we are laughing about it, and you kind of have to. And, of course, we should be more self-reliant. But all of this was totally unnecessary because the nuclear, according to all kinds of reports, including from Jonathan Powell, the nuclear negotiations were going extremely well until Steve Witkoff and on Trump's instructions blew them up. And we are nowhere near where we were at that point in terms of Iran agreeing to anything. Trump made all kinds of statements today about how Iran has agreed not to have a nuclear bomb. I don't think so, darling. I don't think so. I think, you know, we'll find that Iran hasn't agreed to anything very much. And the net result, the damage to the global economy as a result of this 6 weeks of war is impossible to assess at the moment, but people are talking about the biggest economic shock of our lifetime. So I really, really feel for for Rachel Reeves, and I feel for everybody in this country and everybody in the world, actually, because life is going to get more expensive for all of us. And it's not just petrol and energy costs, it's the price of food. It's farmers who are not knowing whether they can plant any crops because they'll have no fertiliser. It's inflation, it's mortgages, it's absolutely everything as a result of this 6 weeks war. And that's even if it stops now and we have a ceasefire, but we have no indications that there will actually be a firm deal. So, I mean, personally, I don't take the Ed Miliband view in terms of the North Sea or whatever. I think self-reliance is important, although, as we know, at the moment, it would be sold on the open market anyway. So it's it just adds a very small amount of energy to a global pool that has been shrunk by 20% at the moment. It doesn't solve our problems. But I mean, you know, everybody's scrabbling around trying to find solutions, and all of these solutions get us nowhere near as good a state as we were in 6 weeks ago. That's the tragedy of it.
And some of the solutions are obviously a long way down the road. They're not going to solve the problem overnight. We must take a break. Time now to see what's making the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers. Well, The Guardian leads on Keir Starmer's troubles over Peter Mandelson and fresh calls for the PM to resign. That's also the lead in the FT, where it says Starmer has been accused of misleading Parliament after it emerged that Lord Mandelson was made ambassador to the US despite having failed to clear security vetting. Starmer in peril is the headline in The Eye, which also carries the accusations that the Prime Minister allegedly misled Parliament over the vetting of Mandelson. The Telegraph carries the same story, saying the Conservatives have insisted that Sir Keir Starmer misled the House and the public. The Times front also leads on calls from opposition parties for Starmer to resign. Starmer on brink as his Mandelson lies are exposed is the front of the Mail. And The Express also leads with that story on its front page. Its headline, Starmer must resign. The Sun carries photos of Sarah Ferguson at a ski resort in Austria and calls for her to break her silence on her relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. The Mirror says Russian President Vladimir Putin has drawn up a hit list of 4 UK locations he could target for helping Ukraine in their war effort. The Star leads with a tribute to former Arsenal goalkeeper Alex Manager, who was killed in a car crash at the age of 48. And the Metro reports comments from Victoria Beckham addressing the ongoing feud with her son, Brooklyn. So let's delve into the papers. We're going to start with the Mirror. Rod, take us into this story. Actually, no, we're not going to start with the Mirror. We're going to have a look at Putin's plan to attack Britain, which
that is the Mirror.
Is in the Mirror, yes.
Yeah.
Page 1 and 5, yes.
Well, it's happened before, and we did nothing. The Russians carried out a premeditated attack upon Alexander Litvinenko and killed him with polonium. And, of course, there was the Skripal business in Salisbury. So this has happened before, and it's happened with impunity to those who've done it. So there is absolutely no question. I mean, I'm sure that the Mirror story is right, that there are probably Russian GRU operatives in this country at this moment looking at what trouble they can cause. And we've seen arrests. You know, this is going to be ongoing, this hybrid warfare and surreptitious warfare against Britain. And indeed, I've seen mentioned in the Mirror against about 9 or 10 other countries in Europe. It will continue. At some point, we will have to say it has to stop. You know, and that will mean facing up to Putin, which I don't think anyone wants to do at the moment.
No, we can't. We haven't got a strong enough military.
We haven't got a strong enough military because 39 years of frittering money away. You know, and cutting the armed services till we have fewer soldiers than were present at the Napoleonic Wars. You know, it's catastrophic, as all the retired admirals and generals and majors say. It has been catastrophic for the armed forces, and it's part of what we were talking about earlier, that we at some point have to learn to stand on our own 2 feet, because you're right, this war has caused a lot of it, but it could have been another war. You know, it could be anything.
No, I think
the world is far more fractious.
Absolutely, I think we have become. I think the thing is that people, because we've essentially had peace in this country. Well, obviously, we fought the Iraq War and so on, but we've had peace in this country since 1945, and that breeds complacency, and people think it couldn't happen to you. Well, it could. You know, I'm half Swedish, and Sweden has gone from not being a member of NATO to joining NATO. It's taking this all extremely seriously, as you would if you were practically on Russia's doorstep.
Yeah.
But we're not very far away either. And also, warfare now, you know, they use the phrase in this piece about the grey zone. That's where a lot of warfare is conducted now. It's cyber attacks. You know, AI, God only knows what Putin could do with AI. I mean, he himself apparently is digitally practically illiterate, but of course he has very skilled operatives.
And we're putting 2.3% of our GDP towards military at the moment.
Yeah.
In 1961-62, the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis, it was 7%, and we were far less well off at the time.
You know. But there are promises from the government to increase that.
Yeah, but
it has been a long time coming.
But there's a fight.
2.5 billion.
And also, there's currently a fight between the Treasury and Downing Street on because the trouble is, all of this, do you spook the bond markets? Do you put taxes up even more? I mean, all of these, I mean, I'd love to see if Reform or Green come in, which Greens come in at the next election, which, you know, I hope Reform doesn't. But I'd love to see how Reform would do the maths here, because it's all very well to pontificate and say we must spend more on this, we must spend more on this. Try getting people to vote for higher taxes, spending more on the army and so on. You know, everyone thinks it's not going to happen to them until it does.
Inside the paper, we'll just bring that up. They're detailing the 4 UK sites in shadow war sabotage alert. It's a direct threat against ordinary British people. That's Colonel Richard
London,
Kemp.
Leicester, Reading and American Air Force Base, I think they've...
Yeah. I think the Mirror is saying that this comes after... this is a few days after Britain said it would supply Kyiv with 120,000 drones, so it's seemingly an exact retaliation. Let's move on to the Times. Going to the bin strikes in Birmingham. Unite officials meet Reform reps over Birmingham bin strikes. Take us into this story, Christina.
Well, I haven't read it, which doesn't help, but if Reform can sort out this strike, then that would be good. I mean, again, it's one of those... The strike's been going on for a long time, and it's awful for Birmingham, people in Birmingham. And we've seen so much footage of, you know, rats and horrific sort of mess and stench and so on. I think it's one of those, sadly, it's one of, and, you know, if we just have to look at the so-called junior doctors, the so-called resident doctors, to look at what happens when people, you know, obviously people want to hold on to the terms and conditions they had before. That's completely understandable. And meanwhile, local councils are trying to cut costs, and they've had this incredibly long-running dispute, and it doesn't seem to be anywhere nearer to resolution. But I do think, as we come up to the May the 7th local elections, particularly in London, where you know, I think all the London councils have got elections. You know, people think they're voting for, you know, Gaza or whatever. They're not. They're voting for, you know, local. They're voting for bin collections. They're voting for potholes in roads. You know, it's that stuff, and doing that stuff on a budget when costs are rising and budgets are shrinking and nobody wants to pay more council tax. All of this stuff is really difficult. So there's a part of me who wants to say, go ahead, Reform, good luck with it, see how you get on, because all the evidence so far is that they're not doing terribly well.
What do you think Reform's chances are of bringing this dispute to resolution?
I think it's fascinating. I think it's about the man who stands on the back of the lorry, by the way, on the little platform at the back. So I think it's all about that one man.
Right.
It's a remarkable story. It's a real challenge for Reform, and it could hurt them. Not particularly Birmingham, but now that they're in power in Worcester, in Kent, in Durham, in Lincolnshire, they suddenly have to deal with the realities of running these vast councils and finding out that, yeah, OK, we've taken down all the rainbow flags, we can all cheer about that for a bit, but the things which we promised you would happen take a lot more nuance and negotiation than they're prepared to do. So you've got, I think it's Worcestershire, which Reform now runs, which has put its council tax up by, I think it's 9%. You know, And you could imagine the Reform voters of Worcester saying, hang on a minute, that's not what you said you were going to do. Now, Durham's reasonably well run by Reform. Darren Grimes in Durham is doing a pretty good job. But even there, I noticed that, you know, a few weeks ago, Labour took a seat back from Reform. So that's going to be happening. It's certainly happening in Kent, where, again, the council tax has risen. If they can do anything, I'm with you. I hope they do. I hope they sort it all out. But it will be something which hangs over Reform right until the next election, assuming that they take loads of council seats, Sunderland, Gateshead, etc., on May the, 7th, 8th? Yeah.
OK. Let's have a look at the Sun front page. Their story, Sarah Ferguson is hiding out in Austria amid calls for her to come clean about her relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Christine?
I wish I could hide out in Austria.
Yeah, I mean, for someone who appears to be an absolutely dreadful human, essentially using
Don't hold back.
Using her children.
That appears to be.
Using her children as bargaining chips for Epstein, inviting Epstein and Harvey Weinstein to his children's parties, even after his conviction and release from prison, taking her daughters over to stay in his properties. I mean, and apparently arranging all kinds of unsavoury things according to the emails that were released. I mean, this is a really appalling person, and how she gets to spend her time wandering from incredibly expensive spa to incredibly expensive spa and staying in people's chalets and so on, I have no idea. I don't know where the money comes from.
That is the
Where
question.
does the money come
Where is
from?
the money coming from? We need to investigate
She hasn't
Sarah
earned a
Ferguson.
living for an extremely long time.
Apart from those awful books she wrote about helicopters.
Was it Budgie?
Budgie
the helicopter.
Budgie the helicopter.
And I don't know where that came from. But the most important thing is whether she will give evidence in the US, and that's the most important question.
Only if she's forced to.
And they can't.
And they can't force
They
her
can't.
to.
Just time for this last story in the Eye. Meghan Markle, the most trolled person in the world, according to her own... This is in her own words.
No, she's not. There's loads of people who are trolled more than she is. I haven't even trolled her. I might think of doing so. I don't think I have.
You're not on X. You can't really troll her on Facebook.
I think we need to fact check that. But she has had a terrible time. In 10 years of it,
she's tried to wreck the royal family. I have no time for her.
You're trolling her now.
What?
You're trolling her now.
Am I?
Yeah, you're saying that she tried to wreck the royal family?
Yes, she did. She can't stand the royal family. She's been disastrous. I can't take her seriously, I'm afraid. And it would be, I think, a relief for the people of this country if they kind of stopped pretending they were still royal and kind of faded away into a quiescence, and we didn't have to hear any more about their spiritual healing and all that stuff.
Christina, one sentence. You've got 5 seconds.
I very much doubt she is the most trolled person in the world. I think she has had she certainly has had a lot of attacks on social media and elsewhere, and I think a fair degree of racist attacks as well. I don't think she has helped herself in recent years with what appeared to be rather narcissistic TV series and so on. But I don't think it's particularly helpful to go around saying that you are the most trolled person in the world. If you want to build empathy and sympathy, that wouldn't be my starting point.
Christina and Rod, thank you both for taking us through the papers. Coming up next, 42 years after last appearing in a European semi-final, Nottingham Forest are through to the final 4 of the Europa League, where they'll face familiar opposition.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
We'd been warned that we would meet people in the lowest moment of their lives.
Their story is one of fundamental American failure. Well, a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club, but I have to say there are more media here than there are supporters.
We love them!
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too. This is just the audience that Joe Biden wanted.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
You know, it's easy to go to politics.
But it's important. It's at the heart of the issue.
For all the talk of a toned-down, humbled Trump, yes, maybe there was just a little less rhetoric, a little less divisiveness, but in the end it was the same rhythm, the same speech, the same man.
All them people that died in Russia and Ukraine, they'd still be alive today if Donald Trump was president.
If it was my wish, have a businessman that's strong like Trump, but maybe just doesn't say as much, you know?
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What we've been allowed to see over here is a humanitarian corridor, free wherever you get your news.
A young American medical student is making remarkable things happen.
I've seen a lot of difficult things, and honestly, it breaks my heart. These children don't deserve that.
I don't think there's a single Arab I know who isn't seriously disturbed by what's going on.
And so they gathered for this wonder of nature.
I'm very excited right now.
This is an extraordinary moment beyond anything I could have expected. Sky News, get the full story first.
I bet right now you often find yourself asking why. Why was a certain decision taken? Why did something happen? Why did they say or do that? I'm Neil Patterson, and it's my job as a journalist to find out why. Just explain why.
It's a difficult one.
Well, I mean, it's massive.
It's a very, very severe situation. So if you want to make sense of this complicated world, Sky News' new podcast, This Is Why, is your daily fix. One story every day, and we can find out why together. Listen and follow wherever you get your podcasts.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more.
Well, let's kick off.
And make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood has rallied around her. It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
Time now to get all the very latest sports news with Mike.
John will, talks about it as the best medical he ever failed. It seems strange you get so far down the line and a player of his calibre, the possibility of signing him, it would have been a massive threat had he signed for Rangers, but thankfully he didn't.
It's very, very seldom you see a player in the building walking around at a club and the deal isn't done, but historically Rangers have been stung a couple of times signing players who had glitches, you might say, in America. Famously Daniel Prodan was one a number of years earlier, but there had been others as well, and I think they'd reached the stage where they weren't going to take any more risk.
And then I failed a medical at Charlton.
John Hartson was last week tipped to be on his way across South London for £5 million. But for the time being, that seems a dead deal.
Been a lot of speculation, and if there was any chance, it would have been done.
Spent the day with Alan Kirbishley, walking around the valley and being in the training ground. And I was training every day. I was scoring goals every weekend. And I'm thinking to myself, I can't pass a medical because of this knee.
I'm not bitter, no, not at all. I'm not a bitter person, I just get on with life. I've got no problems with my knee or nothing, I'm lashing balls in and everything else. And it does get a bit, frustrating at times. People keep going on about medicals and that. So that does unsettle me a little bit.
I shouldn't think you want to see another one again, do you?
No, I don't. I don't want to do any more medicals, to be honest.
So I'm starting to question myself. I think my previous managers were saying, John's fine. He's doing everything asked of him on the training ground. He's playing every week. He's scoring goals. But for some reason, I just couldn't pass this medical. And it was very, very frustrating. It was quite worrying, actually. I'm starting to think, well, where do I go from here?
As transfer soap operas go, this one was beginning to rival Coronation Street. Wimbledon have waived their £5 million fee. The Sky Blues will pay every time the Welsh international pulls on their shirt.
He's had injuries, but if you look at his record of playing, he plays a lot of games.
It's all about pressure, this game, anyway. If you can't handle pressure, you're in the wrong game.
I actually failed the medical first time around at Coventry, but it was Gordon Strachan that pushed it forward and obviously did the deal.
We tried to buy John from Wimbledon a few months before, but then Rangers came in. John failed the medical. We went back to Wimbledon, ended up doing a deal with Wimbledon to buy John for $750,000. I trusted Gordon implicitly. You know, if Gordon felt strongly enough and he got a commitment out of John that John knew his own body, he'd certainly not miss games for the sake of his knee.
Let's see what the weather's going to do to us.